Disruption, Ostapenko flipped the entire script. 6 straight games. No hesitation. No mercy. Just clean, aggressive, high-risk tennis, the same fearless ball striking that once carried her to a Grand Slam title. What looked like a collapse turned into a takeover. And the psychological swing didn't go unnoticed. John McEnroe, a player who practically defined on-court mind games in his own era, reportedly reacted strongly to what he had just seen. Because this wasn't just a comeback. It was a reminder that in tennis, momentum isn't always lost with a mistake. Sometimes, it's taken.
And then there's other times where she wouldn't be feeling it, and there'd be a 17-year-old guy who's the #1 guy in...
When John McEnroe recognizes something like that on a tennis court, it isn't just commentary. It's expertise. It's like a master locksmith watching someone pick a lock in real time and immediately knowing exactly how it was done. Because what unfolded in Linz wasn't random. It fit a pattern. Jelena Ostapenko has built a reputation on winning matches that don't follow clean, predictable scripts. Her 6-0 lifetime record against Iga Swiatek, the world #1, doesn't happen by accident. That's not just power or shot-making. That's disruption. That's controlled chaos. That's knowing how to win when matches get uncomfortable. And what happened against Eala fits right into that identity. Because 5-1 didn't just become 5-7. It was turned into 5-7. One moment. One interruption. One shift that rewrote everything. So rewind the match, because that confrontation with the crowd didn't come out of nowhere. Ostapenko walked into Linz carrying something personal. She was 0-2 against Eala. Miami Open 2025, straight sets loss Eastbourne International, retirement, match unfinished 2 losses. No wins. And against a player who, at the time their rivalry began, wasn't even inside the top 50. For a former Grand Slam champion, a former top 10 player, and a previous Linz title holder, that kind of record doesn't just sit quietly in the background. It builds. It lingers. It sharpens intent. So when she stepped onto the court in Austria, this wasn't just another second-round match. It was a reset opportunity. A chance to reassert control over a matchup that had already slipped away from her twice. And you could feel it from the start. The opening games were controlled, almost cautious. Both players held serve through the first 5 games, neither giving anything away easily. But slowly, point by point, Eala began to take over the rhythm. Her baseline exchanges grew sharper. Her shot selection more confident. She wasn't just competing, she was dictating. And that's when the tension started to surface. Because the match wasn't just about who was playing better. It was about who was losing control.
Humble, and she works hard.
Yes.
That's why we like her, because she's the face of the...
A clean break gave Eala a 4-2 lead. And that moment mattered. Because this wasn't just a lower-ranked player hanging in rallies, this was a world number 46 dictating against a top 25 Grand Slam champion on a surface that has historically favored Jelena Ostapenko. On clay, where time stretches and patterns matter, Eala was the one controlling both. That's a statement. Then came the first shift. Ostapenko broke back immediately in the 7th game. The change wasn't subtle, it was structural. Her signature aggression began to land with precision. Flat, heavy ground strokes that shrink reaction time and rush opponents out of position started connecting cleanly. The same high-risk, high-reward tennis that defines her career suddenly found rhythm. At the same time, Eala's first serve percentage dipped, just slightly, but at exactly the wrong moment. That's all it takes at this level. 4 straight games followed. Set 1, 6-4, Ostapenko. Nothing unusual. No controversy. Just a momentum swing, the kind tennis produces all the time when an elite player raises her level at the right moment. But the second set? That's where this match stops behaving like a normal match. Because after the changeover, Eala came out completely transformed. Whatever adjustment she made, tactical, mental, or both, worked immediately. 4 consecutive games. 2 clean breaks of serve. No hesitation, no drift, just controlled, assertive tennis. Now it was Ostapenko unraveling. Double faults started creeping in again. The body language shifted. Shoulders dropped, frustration visible, timing slightly off. The kind of signals experienced tennis watchers recognize instantly, not just poor form, but discomfort. By 5-1, with Ostapenko serving, the situation was clear. Not officially over, tennis rarely gives you that luxury, but practically decided. The scoreboard. The crowd energy. The emotional momentum. Everything pointed in one direction. This match was heading to a 3rd set. At minimum. And that's exactly what makes what happened next so difficult to explain through conventional tennis logic. Because from that position, 5-1, full control, crowd behind her, matches don't just slip away. They have to be taken. This is where the sequence becomes everything. At 1-5, Jelena Ostapenko held serve. Routine. Expected. No alarms. But the real moment didn't happen at 1-5. It happened earlier, at 1-4. Broadcast footage captured it clearly. Ostapenko didn't just glance at the crowd, she turned fully away from the baseline and confronted it. She pointed her racket directly at a spectator and challenged him, telling him to come down and play in her place. It wasn't subtle frustration. It was targeted. Personal. Deliberate. Then she escalated it. She called over a tournament official. She pointed into the stands. She made it clear, if this continues, something needs to be done. The entire exchange lasted less than 2 minutes. 2 minutes. And those 2 minutes changed the match. Because from the moment play resumed, everything that had been working for Eala stopped working. Completely. No more holds. No more control from the baseline. No more conversion on return games. The player who had dominated the previous 40 minutes of that set suddenly couldn't re-establish rhythm. And Ostapenko? 6 straight games. Not a fluctuation. Not a swing. A complete takeover. 5-1 became 5-7. Final score, 6-4, 7-5. And here's the part that the live broadcast didn't fully confront, the part that caught the attention of John McEnroe. Because the real question isn't what happened. It's why it happened exactly then. Was that confrontation a spontaneous emotional reaction? Or was it something far more calculated, a perfectly timed interruption designed to break rhythm, cool momentum, and reset the psychological balance of the match at the exact moment she needed it most? McEnroe, of all people, understands that territory better than anyone. His career was built, in part, on moments like this, on confrontations with officials, with crowds, with anything that could disrupt flow and shift energy. Not always intentional, not always controlled, but undeniably effective. So when he watched that sequence unfold at 1-4, 15-40, he didn't see a player simply losing composure. He saw a pattern. He saw timing. He saw something that looked a lot less like frustration, and a lot more like strategy. He didn't see emotion. He saw execution. And that distinction matters. Because there is a fundamental difference between a player losing control and a player using disruption as a tool. That's why John McEnroe's reaction carries a weight most commentators simply don't have on this subject. He lived in that space. He understands the mechanics of breaking rhythm, not just physically, but psychologically. He didn't hesitate. He went off. And the tennis world, largely moved on. Without really sitting with what he was saying long enough to ask the uncomfortable question, what if he was right? Because writing off what happened in Linz as a one-off emotional outburst requires ignoring something much bigger, a pattern that has followed Jelena Ostapenko throughout her career and has become even more visible during her 2026 season. Start with something that seems minor, but isn't. Her relationship with electronic line calling. For years, opponents and analysts have pointed out the same thing. She challenges calls at a frequency that stretches beyond normal probability. Not always because she expects to win the challenge, but because of what the challenge does. It pauses the match. It forces the opponent to wait. It disrupts timing. It cools momentum. Whether intentional or instinctive doesn't even matter at that point, the effect is the same. It breaks rhythm. Then there's the statistic that refuses to fit into any conventional tennis explanation. A 6-0 head-to-head record against Iga Swiatek. The world number 1. The most dominant clay court player of her generation. And yet, against Ostapenko, 0 wins. That's not normal. That's not something rankings or shot quality alone can explain. It suggests something else operating in those matches. Something psychological. Something disruptive. A specific approach to high-pressure situations that produces outcomes the numbers don't predict. Now look at her 2026 season heading into Linz. A 9-8 record. On the surface, average. But inside that record? A different story. The wins tend to come against higher-ranked opponents, and they often arrive in matches where the flow isn't smooth. Matches with interruptions. With conversations. With moments that shift energy away from pure baseline exchanges. Once you start looking for the pattern, it stops being subtle. And then you return to Wednesday night in Linz. To that moment at 1-4. To that 2-minute interruption. To what followed. And suddenly, it doesn't feel random anymore. It feels consistent. Because the final stats only tell part of the story. Yes, Jelena Ostapenko hit 41 winners. That's the headline number. That's the firepower. But winners alone don't explain how a match flips from 5-1 down to 6 straight games won. That kind of shift requires something else. Something less visible. Something harder to quantify, but impossible to ignore once you've seen it. On paper, the numbers seem to settle everything. Jelena Ostapenko finished with 41 winners. Eala had just 9. Case closed, right? Superior firepower. More experience. Better player on her preferred surface. Except, that explanation falls apart the moment you look at when those winners were actually hit. Because the 41 winner total wasn't built steadily across the match. It was concentrated. Heavily. During the final 6 games. Go back to the phase where Eala was in control, 4-0, then 5-1. At that point, Ostapenko wasn't dictating with winners. She was missing. Errors were leaking. Timing was off. Frustration was visible. The dominance didn't exist yet. It arrived after the interruption. Which means the statistics don't describe a player who was consistently overpowering her opponent. They describe something else entirely, a player who was struggling, created a disruption, and then performed at a completely different level once that disruption had reset the match environment. That distinction matters. Because Eala's 9 winners don't tell the story of a player being outclassed. They tell the story of a player in control, until that control was taken away. Surgically. At the exact moment it mattered most. And when you zoom out, what happened in Linz becomes bigger than just a round of 16 loss. Because Eala wasn't some unknown player having a lucky week. Her 2026 trajectory had already established something far more serious. She arrived in Austria having broken into the top 50, climbing to a career-high ranking that signaled real arrival, not potential, but presence. And before that? The statement run. At the Miami Open 2025, she didn't just compete, she announced herself. She defeated Jelena Ostapenko, Madison Keys, Iga Swiatek back-to-back-to-back. Not as a seeded player. As a wildcard. That's not a hot streak. That's a breakthrough. A signal to the entire WTA Tour that this isn't a prospect anymore, this is a problem. And the tennis world noticed. Mats Wilander, a 7-time Grand Slam champion, went as far as comparing her tennis IQ to John McEnroe. That's not casual praise. That's historical weight. Add to that her development at the Rafa Nadal Academy, her composure under pressure, her ability to construct points against elite opponents, and suddenly, the Linz match isn't just about a blown lead. It's about interruption meeting emergence. Because everything Eala had built in that second set, every pattern, every rhythm, every layer of control, was working. Until it wasn't allowed to continue. At just 20 years old, Eala isn't just playing for ranking points. She's carrying history. Before her, the Philippines had never produced a WTA top 100 player. Every match she steps into isn't just another tour-level appearance, it's a cultural milestone. And that reality follows her everywhere. So does the crowd. The Filipino fan base that travels with her, from Miami to Linz and beyond, is something women's tennis rarely sees. Not casual support. Not scattered applause. Organized. Vocal. Relentless. A traveling wave of energy for a player from a nation that, until now, didn't exist on this stage. Most of the time, that's an advantage. In Linz, it may have become something else. Because the same crowd that fuels Eala's momentum may have also handed Jelena Ostapenko exactly what she needed, a trigger. And this is where the conversation gets precise. Because the word cheating doesn't apply here. Not technically. Ostapenko didn't break any rules. She didn't commit a code violation. Confronting a spectator? Allowed. Calling over an official? Allowed. Taking time between points to address crowd behavior? Still within the boundaries of the WTA rulebook. Legally, everything checks out. But that's not the argument John McEnroe was making. His point lives in a different space. Because legality and sportsmanship are not the same thing. Something can be fully within the rules.